We're taking a look at ISIS and how they're funded and their financing. I'm joined today by Juan Zarate, CBS News Senior National Security Analyst, and Brian Katulis from the Center for American Progress. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
So Juan, I'll start with you. So let's talk about ISIS and their financing. First of all, where are they getting their money?
Well, ISIS in some ways has developed a hybrid form of funding, right? So they have figured out how to run a war economy. They are controlling the elements of the environment in which they control. And so things like oil installations in refineries, food granaries, being able to extort and tax individuals operating businesses in the regions that they control. And so they've developed an ability to actually run off of the land, so to speak. They've also combined that with the broader global networks that have traditionally supported Sunni jihadi causes. Donors, for example, out of the Gulf, places like Qatar and Kuwait, the U.S. Treasury has talked about openly in recent months. And so they've combined the ability to raise funds and run an economy locally with the ability to tap into the enthusiasm for their cause globally. And that really presents challenges for counterterrorism officials and in some ways is a more complicated terrorist funding model than what we've seen in the past.
Mm-hmm. And so how does an economy like this work? I mean, you're not dealing with cash. You don't have people running around with bags with dollar signs on them. I mean, how does this actually work and move money around?
Well, it actually, it does run on cash in many ways. They are running the local economy. So they're literally selling, in some cases, refining the oil that they control. They're selling it.
To who?
Well, this is interesting. They're selling it to brokers. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, in Syria, where they control most of the oil producing, or the most significant oil producing areas, they've been dealing with Turkish brokers. And so literally truckers will take the oil that is sold to them and take it across the border and sell it at a discount. They'll pay the ISIS brokers or individuals, and they'll run the economy that way. They also sell to the Assad regime, and so they're actually running oil to regime checkpoints, charging for the security of those truck convoys, so making money off the security, making money off the deal, and the regime is sending cash their way. That cash is then spent on arms, it's spent on loyalty, paying tribals, and used to run their operations. They are now a governing unit in the Syrian-Iraqi zone.
And is there any way to stop this kind of movement of money around in Iraq?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing that could be done is these sources of support coming from the Gulf that Juan talks about. And Treasury has taken some limited action there. I think they're taxed with all of the sanctions we have on Russia, on Iran. And I think there's a capacity issue right now. But there's more that could be done to cut that off. Inside these societies, I think it's really difficult, but I think important to try to do. It's very much connected not only to the economy, but to the politics. Who is actually the power brokers in these societies? And that's why this stress that President Obama has put on the Iraqi government in Baghdad, which is just one facet of governance in both Iraq and Syria, but whether ruling societies govern decently and actually aren't corrupt. And I think what ISIS is doing, how they've been able to develop these financial networks is in part a reaction to the disgust with the corruption, which was rampant inside of Iraq, and people have alternative mechanisms for getting things done. Absolutely. So I think one way of actually addressing this, and this is not an immediate solution, but it is the sort of thing that when President Obama and others, President Bush talked about this, of having decent governance. It sounds soft, but it actually cuts to the core of actually how do you squeeze these terrorists and criminals? You do that by having institutions that actually function and deal with all sectors of society equitably. You root out corruption. That's a very long game, and it's nowhere near where we're at right now. We're in a crisis situation trying to arrest their advances.
This group, born out of al-Qaeda in Iraq, really has learned the lessons of how to operate, right? Al-Qaeda in Iraq tried this in western Iraq for some time. They were involved in bank robberies, oil smuggling. You know, back to the days when I was in the White House, they were doing this stuff. They also learned that they couldn't alienate the local populations. And so to govern, to control economies, they didn't just need to sweep in and destroy and rob and pillage. They actually needed to try to run the economy and run the governance. And that's, to me, the most interesting part of this, because as this Islamic State sweeps into places like Mosul and other things, they're not burning down the banks. They may be looting it, but they're allowing the economies to continue to operate, and then they're acting like leeches on top of that economy and leveraging it. That's an interesting evolution of this group that makes it different from what we saw with al-Qaeda in Iraq.
And they're only able to do that, again, because of the lack of good governance on the part of the Iraqi government. I mean, that's why I think things look gloomy right now inside of Iraq, but you compare it to, say, 2005, 2006, when there were no Sunnis that were part of the negotiation over politics. Right now, you still have a negotiation over politics. It seems like Maliki may be moving aside. It seems like there's an alternative that's been proposed to him. That is what we didn't have before. You didn't have that, certainly under Saddam Hussein, and you have this opening. And people like to just be grim and pessimistic about Iraq. And I think there's one hope there, that as dysfunctional as their politics are right now, it's still actually moving, that people still have an interest in showing up.
With a hard problem like this that straddles boundaries or erases boundaries between Syria and Iraq, you really do need a regional solution. You need the organic, on-the-ground solution. But to do that, you still need American leadership. And I think that's what the region's calling for, and I think that's what this problem calls for. What is the broad strategy to dislodge this group and to sort of gain the momentum back for the good forces in the region?
And I don't think the answer is we don't have one right now. And when I talk to people in this administration, I think they're in a reactive, tactical crisis management mode. This summer, what has happened? The problems of Syria and the problems of Iraq have now merged. It's staring us right in the face. Yet, I think we have a policy process that stovepipes these two problems to a large extent. And we need to move rapidly as a country, and I think our leadership role is important, but rapidly to look at this problem set, these problems of both Iraq and Syria, as joint and together. Easier said than done, but essential to do.
Fascinating. We'll keep an eye on it very closely. Brian Katulis from the Center for American Progress, Juan Zarate from CBS News. I'm Steve Chaggaris from CBSNews.com. Thanks for watching.